evolved with people's roles and jobs, pre-AI, post-AI, and post-AGI. I'm one of the hosts, Steve Coywolf, or Coywolf, and we have Marius and Jhonatan here.
Hello,
so
guys.
Marius
Hello.
is the person came up with the idea for the show, and we could let him kick it off with sharing a little bit more detail about what's the story behind it.
Yes, thank you for the nice intro. So the show is called The Human Variable. So as you may get out of the name, it's about the human aspect. Personally, the show grew out of the confusion I had as a software engineer, that I saw myself doing the daily actions I had as a software engineer less and less, and I became more of a person who's just accepting requests and denying them and seeing how it grows over time. And I just wanted to have a medium for myself, and then I thought for others to talk about how their professional life has changed, like Steve already mentioned, pre-AI, post-AI, and possibly, if we still have some time left that day, post-AGI. This is also our slogan. Our slogan is very plain and simple. It's how we put the I into AI. So we really focus on getting an idea of not just how AI frames us, because there's the conversation. It's such an overwhelming thing. Yesterday I had a conversation with a friend, and he showed me an AI demo of a company, and he says like a 7 months old. Oh my God, so old. And you think about it, it's 7 months. That's not even that old. But in the world of AI, that's like 22 decades. It's like, oh my God.
And so, like a system or something, or just kind of like an automation process or something?
It was AI as a recruiter company I talked to yesterday, and they had an AI recruiter that, so you as a software engineer had a person to kind of, let's put it in a nice way, roast you on how well or bad you're doing in your interview. And back then, the latency of AI models was still noticeable, so it was like a little bit of a lag before that woman or man actually responded to you, but it was meant as a way of giving you confidence in your interviews.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. It was very interesting. But to me, it was even more interesting than the fact that he just showed me and said, oh my God, Marius, this is such an old video. And then I looked at the release date, and he was like 7 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It looked old. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then I saw a demo of the same thing, which is like 5 days old. And now I understand why he thinks it's very old, because the rate of progress between those two demos, amazing.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing about AI, is how quickly things are moving. And I think that's one thing as humans we kind of have a difficult time getting our heads around and grasping, because our frame of reference of how quickly things can kind of develop has been limited by how quickly people can take those actions. And it's one person communicating to another, having a meeting. With AI, there's no schedule, and the number of data points and number of things that can be executed simultaneously and autonomously is astronomical in comparison, and especially the things where they could generate their own dummy data and do their own calculations and be able to read 100,000 things simultaneously with one individual, or one individual as an AI individual reading it and processing that information, rather than like 4 or 5 people reading it, then transcribing it, then trying to figure out the different communications, shortening the notes, and then collaborating. Now you have one source doing it, so it's just gonna hockey stick it. So
yeah,
this is also a research paper I saw yesterday. I just wanted to touch on that very quickly. It's also scary and amazing to see as a software developer, but with any professions out there, is that there are also companies currently just saying, like, instead of being the most intelligent model, which we'll touch on way more later on, you can just take a lot of models, giving it a lot of different ways of trying to do things, and then over quantity, you're just going to find the right way to do it. Well, I cannot copy and paste myself as a human and try hacking away on my computer like 100 times a second And AI can actually do that. And that's just something what Steve said made me think of it again. Yes, we have this ability to try so many things now and see where this goes. So I think there's going to be an explosion of things we will figure out and see and research and build and everything.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I actually kind of like wanted to touch a little deeper into what you guys do, what's your experience, so that way we can, kind of like put stuff in the table on what we're going to be talking about in the program. As Marius mentioned and Steve, it's basically just finding the human input into this new world where we're headed, where everything is going to be AI. I've noticed that today, for example, and this is something we're going to talk about in this episode as well. It's building a second brain, and so I've started building it, and I've started using AI more than before. Actually, I'm kind of like embedding it everywhere. But before we go there, I don't know who wants to go first and kind of like introduce yourself at a deeper level.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's one of the common themes that actually led me down this path. And I guess in a way, in an extension, meeting John and Marius through AI communities that we have all commonly been involved in. And a lot of it is, I do believe that AI is going to be a way to extend our own thinking and really open up the horsepower that we have in our own heads, which is far greater than any computer or supercomputer, really. But it's kind of locked away with the way that we all the steps we have to do to process things initially. So we could offload those manual tasks to AI, and that's a perfect segue into a little bit of my background. So I can kind of start off and sharing a little bit about that. And so we'll share a little bit about how I got into AI, my work experience, etc. So I studied industrial engineering in college. That's where I graduated, and actually studied a few different engineering disciplines. I was an electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, but ultimately gravitated toward industrial and manufacturing engineering because I really liked the study of efficiency and how things were made and the Industrial Revolution. And being an industrial engineer, I looked at which pathways I can go to. So industrial engineers, they work anything from hospitals to figuring out like the most efficient way to run an exam room or an entire hospital, to traditionally, which has been in the manufacturing floor. And the automotive industry, for example, is heavily designed as far as the workflows by industrial engineering. The automotive industry heavily shaped the discipline of industrial engineering as well, with things like Toyota developed and Lean, Six Sigma, the assembly line, making things more efficient, or human factors engineering, figuring out like what's the safest way, quickest way to do different things. So that led me down to my first career at Rockwell Automation, Allen Bradley, where I was a controls engineer or factory automation engineer, whatever you want to call it. It's basically my job was like a TV show, How It's Made. I covered Western or Northern California. And I had a lot of the factories, from any type of factory you think of, automotive plants to, food and beverage, to oil and gas, to solar and semiconductor, and looked at all the control system inside of it to help them become more efficient, whether it's food safety, measuring, tracking and tracing from the farm to the fork, to understanding how a solar panel is assembled, manufactured, what the best way to lay out an assembly line is for that, better way to control the robots, safety systems. Moved from there to oil and gas to deal with highly complex applications to protect from surge events, which is a compressor inside of a large refinery is like the heart and soul that moves all the gas through the refinery. So you could think of like a 10,000 horsepower motor inside of a car. You're driving 100 miles per hour down the highway. If you throw it in reverse, it'd probably be not so good. And that's the type of event that could happen in a refinery when you're moving gas around. So you have to have some type of protective control and open up a valve and control the speeds of all these things to prevent things like that from happening. So did that, worked with the likes of folks like Chevron, Fluor, and a lot of the large companies to implement these projects to control the refinery systems. But from there, moved on to working with city and government. So did a little stint there, helping cities become more energy efficient. Looking at wastewater plants, all the lighting structures, all the heating and ventilation, how water and energy moves through the city. And then, after that, it kind of took a completely big shift, or what would be seemingly a shift. But as an industrial engineer, it's really in the same realm, and moved over to software and helped build a YouTube analytics startup. And while I was there, I saw that since things were moving from television to YouTube, now new challenges arise for these media companies, because now you're not dealing with a set of actors. You have to employees or actors you have to pay in your own country, in your own company. Now you have 20,000 creators spread out in different a few hundred different countries, and everyone wants to get paid in different formats. So how do you pay them? This became a big challenge, and I helped develop a platform to distribute those payments and got that company to be cash flow positive. And that was also an industrial engineering need. It was like, this is a process that's being done manually. How do we automate it without error? Because even though they're using software, they're having teams of 20 in India running Python scripts. Since we'd already built the analytics engine, it would be just adding a ledger and reconciliation model and then connecting it to a payment distribution thing. And now you could do that within a matter of clicks with 100% accuracy, rather than 2 months lag with 20 people. So, built that up. From there, went to like large ERP companies, doing like ERP-like companies, I'd say, like working at Coupa Software, building procurement software. Did some work at agencies. So did everything from like building software for drones to do agriculture applications, to fly around, to doing doing construction projects, to doing virtual tours in manufacturing facilities, to doing transportation stuff. And working a lot of these agencies, it was like, okay, I could do this myself, but I think the real opportunity is taking hardware and software, which I've done in both, combining the processes, because software took hardware manufacturing processes, took the good parts of it, and applied it in a shorter cycle time. So you could actually develop software and launch it really quickly. And that was a big advent of like the lean startup and things that like Eric Riles talks about. And it's really taking an extension of Toyota's Kanban system and just-in-time manufacturing, and taking that and applying to software. But now manufacturing can learn from the advent of software and do that. So in the process, I started combining art, built this wild motorcycle and a whole manufacturing facility to kind of build out my own agency, but that covers hardware and software and the combination of the two. So areas like robotics, and those worlds are merging really quickly. But during that process, I had happened to stumble on AI, and now that's really taking up more of the focus of the agency. So I'm helping a few of my clients build apps, build their startups, get into accelerators. So that's been a bulk of some of the things that I've been focused on. And a lot of my work has been previously coming from TopTel, which is an agency that helps get like the top few percentage of product managers and get them to help, do consulting and those type of things. But now I'm branching out on my own. But yeah, some examples for here would be like, how do you do rapid prototyping to get a handle shape fit for a market, where you could actually start developing the design early, and different area may have a different ergonomics or different preference on design, but now you can actually design simultaneously and then adjust everything accordingly. So yeah, that's a quick long and short of it. And then I'll kind of pass it off to one of y'all.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Actually, I was a little curious here. You did mention like that you see kind of like software guiding the way of like hardware development. Like what do you think of that? And like what got you thinking that way? I don't know. I'm kind of like intrigued. I don't know a lot about hardware, so.
Yeah, so like in manufacturing, you have the pull system, and a lot of that came from the automotive industry, because if you're building a bunch of different cars, you have to order all the subcomponents. You want to minimize your inventory and those type of things. So you only want to start building the car and start ordering the parts at the last minute. And the same thing with software. When you're doing the agile software development, you're not doing a full plan out of like, here's what I'm going to like design and release in a year from now or 2 years from now. That's how software used to be done in the early days. Now it's like, hey, here's somewhat of the area that I'm going to define every 2 weeks. You're planning out all the features you're going to develop, and it allows you to adjust and pivot based on feedback from the market. Where you're designing part of it, you're putting it out there, you're testing it, you're getting that feedback and pulling it back. On the hardware side, the issue that you have is like, this is where there's a disconnect. Like, so the software industry, like, move fast, break stuff. That doesn't actually apply, very applicable to mission critical things. For example, in oil and gas refining applications, mission critical things, move fast, break stuff will definitely kill somebody. So for those type of things, you have a controller, and if you have like a duplex or triplex controller, you would have, let's say it's like triple triplex, you would have 3 different chips inside it for the processors, made in 3 different facilities from 3 different manufacturers, 3 different power supplies made from 3 different manufacturers, on a rack, programmed by 3 different developers in 3 different languages, and then all checked. And then all 3 of them are running simultaneously that are checking each other. So if one fails, the other one picks up, the other one picks up, or they're all running at the same time. So even if one completely goes out, the other one's still running that process so that compressor doesn't go out. So you definitely don't just send things out and fix it later. So with this type of staged manufacturing, maybe you can send some parts of it out. Like, for example, like a handle shape might be just a preference, right? So you could start sending those designs out and refine those later. But let's say the metallurgy of, like, if it's a mission critical thing, that you refine completely. So that's like, hey, the crystalline structure has to be on this. It's got to have this particular tensile strength, this yield break strength. Here's how this is going to work. That stuff is super locked down. The other things that don't necessarily matter, that are preferences, those could be a little bit more nebulous and adjust along the way. So your quality check pieces are still there for mission critical things. And for software, you can do the same principles, where in development, you're doing design reviews. Maybe you send it over to committee. There's a checklist. You do 3 major releases where the critical pieces of design are in those, and they go through an approval process internally. And then you can develop those, and each one before it has just got those checks and those QA processes kind of put in place. For example, if your company deals with secure stuff and you have a platform team developing it, and you have a team that's developing a module, that team, they'll create their design. It gets vetted by the platform team, and since it touches the security part, now the security part pulls in. Or if there's a HIPAA compliance team, that goes and checks in design, and they have a checklist, and they'll say, hey, you didn't account for this field. This data has to be scrubbed, or this data has to be like hidden here. So now, like, when you're designing it, now that's put in the spec, and now when you do your quality check, that's in there, and that's part of the design or specification of that particular feature. So.
And Steve, one thing I wanted to touch on, which just came to my mind, is like, me as a software engineer, maybe also don't have too much touch point on that, but you hear a lot in the news, like in video this, photo AI that, software engineering there. Have you already seen products, news, companies also using AI to guide in hardware related stuff? I don't know. I'm spitballing here, something, an AI.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that a little bit, like, for example, just to try it out. And even like Autodesk is starting to implement AI into it. And, you know, and that's the thing, like, for example, there's a lot of different ways to use AI. It's like, hey, you could say, hey, what are the different shapes? You could use it for research. Other ways that I've actually implemented it is, for example, in my shop, I have, you know, a multitude of different machines, a multitude of different specs. I'm not operating a welder every single day, or operating my scenes like a mill every single day. So I'm not going to have all the feed speeds, all those things like in my head. I'm going to have to either calculate it out, or let's say I'm using a milling machine, which is like cutting like around this shape, right? And depending on the metal, like this is Nitro V, you're going to have a certain depth you can cut in, certain speed you can kind of cut in. And if you go any faster, you're going to break a bit, or you're going to have not the right finish. So in order to do that, I would have to go look up on a chart, calculate it out, and do all that. But now I could actually have that engineering handbook loaded onto a database, and I could have all those facts, all those pieces loaded up, and I could just go to my LLM and be like, hey, what do I set this machine at? It automatically knows that, okay, I have a Bridgeport mill. I have these bits on hand. Just like use this type of like this type of end mill, and you're cutting this metal, and it may know the context of the project and be like, okay, just take this knob, set it to like this RPM, cut at this depth. It's going to give it to me in inches because it knows that machine's on inches, not meter, not metric. For example, it's going to be like, give me thousandths of an inch. And there we go. Boom, boom, boom. We're ready to go. Versus, so like now contextually, it's taking information out of the user manual that I have set for it. It knows what's available, it knows the metals that I'm using. So it takes that, cross-references those two, and hands me that data. Now I'm just setting it, versus I'd have to go grab the engineering handbook, thumb through the pages, look for it, try to go, and then go and run the calculation. Now I can go and do that. And, it could even give me the numbers, and I could just manually do the calculation and double check it, because sometimes AI is not good at math. But regardless, it could at least bring up that page for me. So I think you're muted, by the way.
Viewers, like a rough example, like your professional opinion right now from the two processes with AI and without AI. What kind of like multiplicator are you thinking here? Is it making you 2 times faster in the same process, 5 times faster?
Yeah, I mean, it really, that's a great question. I mean, that's the type of things we did, factory automation. And you see, in this particular case, AI is not designing it. AI is fetching information. So it's actually supplementing a different part of the process. And you touched on it earlier about looking at kind of our human mental states and like flow state. I think this was a conversation we're having offline, not on the podcast. But when you're in that state of like trying to solve this problem, like a lot of the things I was doing with my art project is like I'm designing and building and figuring out how to do the things simultaneously. So at that point, you don't want to go through the states of your brain where you're stressed out and trying to figure that out, because now your creative function goes down and your problem solving ability goes down if you're searching for information, searching and retrieving information. So in this particular instance, what AI is doing is searching, retrieving, and serving up information that I already know, that I already have access to, rather than me thumbing through it and pulling it up. So in fact, it's more acting as an automation and replicating that manual task, where a lot of people look at AI as something that is going to go create something completely for you. And it's going to take away their job. This one, now you're really creating much higher quality work, because you're dedicating more of your time to the functions of creating the thing that you want to create, rather than fetching information. But AI could also give you like 10 different things, look up the information, the history of all the things, aggregate all information, and give you, say, hey, this is like, for example, this is like a dive knife, right? The back of this is used to cut rope, and the jimping is designed a certain way. So we know the functions of it, we know the history of it, and that could be put into the product marketing documentation. Let's say if it's like, this might be useful for people in this region, there's people that dive, so maybe it has this scale on it, and a few hundred units of this is marketed to this market or this cohort of individuals. The one without it is marketed to another one, and you can kind of see where the demand is and then create the product. And now you're actually able to provide products that fit the user's needs a lot easier, with a lot lower development cost, which may not be possible. And you may not be able to have that product mix and also be able to have those profit margins, because now you're over developing a particular product that's not selling as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things, but yeah, before we go out of that, I mean, that's like digging into the topics. Like, why don't Jhonatan, Marius, share a little bit about you guys' backgrounds as well? So before we derail too much into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting.
But excellent topics for other episodes. We could certainly dig into like details of like manufacturing.
Absolutely.
I think you just mentioned one, and then I'll let you introduce yourself, Jhonatan. I just think you mentioned one very important fact I just don't want to lose here, is that, like you said, we define AI mostly as generative AI, to generate something, and that implies creating something new. But like you said, for example, you can use it to retrieve stuff as well. It's still generating some text, but it's more of a function of retrieving and accessing information, similar to our brain is supposed to do it, but AI is just 20 times better at that. While you mentioned on another different point, you can also use to explore stuff which is like all stuck up there, but we don't like actively have the ability to just prompt our brain like we have the ability to prompt an AI. So, or we have to then also the ability to create stuff out of nothing. So I think people, when they define AI, they shouldn't just see it in this one way of generating stuff. See it as a tool for different kind of, like a Swiss Army knife. You can retrieve, you can explore, and you can create, and probably even more that we're currently not discussing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's like the way that I kind of like look at the brain function, where it kind of unlocks the brain. I guess I'll just lean into it. Is when you're creating, you're actually functioning in a different brain phase, and when you're searching and retrieving, it's actually downshifting gears. Like if you're doing like a car transmission, and your peak performance is up here. So like when you downshift and you kind of get stressed out and you can't find the information that you're looking for, now you've downshifted. And you've kind of gone into this orient response where you're like looking and hunting for that information. And your brain at that point is highly optimized to like absorb all the information around you. It's not using that part of the brain, which is like used for that creativity aspect of it. So once you get that information, now you have to kind of shift up and get back to that area. But now time has passed. So the longer, like once you're in this phase, the longer you're in that search and retrieval phase, the longer it takes to get back all the way up there. And that's kind of where I think it's like you could be able to just keep like now if AI is able to serve it, you don't actually ever drop all the way down here. You're actually able to just kind of keep raising that bar up. And that's like the things that I'm really excited to look at. And also on the other aspect, simultaneously, we can't hold more than like 10, 15 variables. Like if that's on the high end of looking at different things in our mind as variables, and then if those 10, 15 things have another 10, 15 things attached to them, now we're looking at 100 aspects. So in order for us to jog, we have to jog through all of those and all those subsets quickly. What the thing is, like AI could be like, hey, you're trying to do this, here's all these things, and now you're looking at the 7 pieces from the 10, the 15, or 10 to 15, and the 10 to 15 subparts. Out of those, you may only want to extract those 8 or 9 that's contextual to this. And AI can help you do that because like, hey, which one has these relationships or attributes? So that's kind of where like now it's like you save that step of like shifting through all this stuff stuff you already know, you've already looked at, but you have to do it each time over and over to grab all that, or it just randomly stumbles into it and AI can help you do that. Oh. But anyways, yeah.
Well,
and
that's
sorry.
Sorry. So you go ahead. You go ahead.
I just wanted to create real quick. But all you said is true, and about also like how it activates our brain. But what I also noticed, and I would like to give your feedback on that, it is just very, very pleasing to just see AI like produce that text in real time sometimes and get that instant feedback, get that instant like. It is like what you wish you would have at school, maybe, or in your job place, that like the instant feedback when you go to your boss, just like, go hang up your phone, go ahead and stop talking to that guy, just give me that feedback. And it's just like very pleasing to have that with AI. But you go ahead, Jonathan, introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I do agree with you on that. But yeah, I kind of like wanted to, well, first of all, it's definitely super exciting to share this space with you guys. Because believe it or not, I'm always learning. Every time we're on a call, there's always something new I learn. And I guess I wanted to kind of like talk a little bit of what you guys were saying on production. And I guess we're gonna get to that point eventually in this conversation, because there's obviously a shift that's gonna happen in production, especially because we will have this decrease in pricing, and the way I see the market shifting eventually. And I guess I'll just give you a little bit of my background here before I get into that. So my name is Jhonatan Sanchez. I'm 26 years old, and I'm currently based in Mexico, in Querétaro, which is a city a little bit north from Mexico City. I lived in Canada for the last 9 years of my life. I did college up there. I went to university. I hold a degree in marketing, and I do have another degree in business development. Later, I moved to Europe, and I got a, what do you say this? A, completely forgot, a master's degree in blockchain. And it's not in programming, but it's basically on implementing AI. And so in my past, I have done trading. I did trading for like 4 years, and I'm really good at it, honestly. The only reason I stop is just the level of stress you have, especially when you don't have AI helping you. And that's something I actually want to get back into eventually, now that I have AI and that I know how to use it. And that's why I was mentioning that I do see a big shift happening in the market, especially for future markets. I was just going over some financial news, and I saw that in the US, a lot of retail stores are closing. Target, I can't remember the name of this store, but they're closing like 310 locations in the US by the end of this year, which is insane. But what we're seeing here, it's hyper automation just happening. When you see the numbers, you see Amazon, for example, they've actually adapted to this era a lot faster. And obviously they're driving the numbers, and they're just growing exponentially, as well as Walmart, for example. They're also closing some locations around the US, but they're offering drone delivery right now, right? So yeah, I guess it's just super interesting. And I guess that's the perspective I have in AI. I've been in sales for 9 years. I worked for American companies. I worked for different companies. I worked for LabCorp, which is the largest laboratory in the US. They just got a new name. Can't remember. Oh, it's called Fortrea now. And so I did gain a lot of experience in there, in automation, as well as some health research. I was specialized in Botox research, which was used for migraine and some stuff in the brain. So they literally got Botox injected into the brain to kind of like solve some of the migraine problems people had. So it was super interesting to see. In the sales side, I worked for some of the largest sawmill companies in Canada, Norwood Sawmills, where I was able to get to know a lot of people. I used to handle around like 35 to 40 calls a day. I've sold over $45 million in my career. So that's kind of like my background. Nowadays, I do have an AI automation agency. I founded about a year and a half ago. And basically what I do, it's we specialize on helping just regular companies. And I say regular companies because I'm talking for these companies that are not implementing AI. And that could be like any size, from like small businesses, which is not my target market, but I do help them as well. And we kind of like create this entire ecosystem to help them grow their sales. I've helped companies grow their sales up to 180% in revenue, which is a lot. And yeah, so that's just kind of like a little bit of my background here. We are members of the National Alliance of Artificial Intelligence in Mexico, where there are only 305 members as of now, and we are the only and the first AI automation agency to be part of this. We have been also part of some, how do you say this, like meetings we've had with UNESCO, for example, where we were working on creating this kind of like readiness assessment methodology. That's what it's called, and you can go to our website and download it from there. Our website, it's intellectia.io, well, www. And then so we worked in we worked with UNESCO to kind of like figure out where Mexico was standing at in the sense of AI implementation, and check out whether if we were ready for it economically. In Mexico, 70% of the population, it's under the poverty line, so that's a lot of people. And out of that 70% of people, 30%, I think it is, like 30% are indigenous, and they're like literally away from everything. In the banking system, only 60% of Mexicans do have access to a bank account. And so we're now talking of an entire population that it's shifting, and literally what you were saying, Marius. So like as of now, we are seeing how our lives are changing, because I do see that personally because of the speed I have now in building stuff. And now if you think about all these people that are out there, and we're just talking about Mexico here, but if we go to Africa, you've been in Africa, Marius, so like the great difference that's out there. And I think it's super important to advocate for all these people as well, and kind of like think of them, not just as a number, but as people are individuals that are out of the system, and that it's super important for us to kind of like get these people in the system. Just as one of our possible clients here, they have a hospital, and they're looking to get telehealth services to all these people that are up in the mountains and that are like abandoned from society. So yeah, that's what we were working on with UNESCO and the National Alliance of AI, which was founded by one of the senators. Her name is Alejandra Lagunes. She was part of her presidential cabinet from the previous president, and she was a person in charge of technology development in the country. And I mean, she's a very smart person. Maybe we could at some point get her in the podcast as well, so we can listen to her, because I've been exposed to a lot of policymakers, especially because that's kind of like where I got in my agency a little bit. And the reason why I kind of like wanted to hold on to this side, it's because as being members of the National Alliance of AI, we have the potential to kind of like influence AI legislation in the country. We've also been part of the agreement that was signed in the Senate of the Republic for neuro rights. And so basically Mexico, thanks to the RAM, it's already preparing for this kind of like synopsis that's going to happen eventually with humans and AI, right? Which it's very strange, I guess. That's going to be another entire episode where we can discuss on that. But yeah, that's a little bit of my background here, and yeah, I'm just super excited to share knowledge with you guys, and learn from you, and definitely build up something good from here. And obviously having all these people listening to us, and just gaining insight into where we're headed.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I think you touched
excellent.
on a very, sorry, very
Yeah,
interesting point here, that since AI is just like very much our knowledge accumulated together in one big ball, right? One big ball of knowledge. Is that in countries or continents, sorry, in Africa, where maybe the systems haven't come into yet, all of them have a phone anyways, though. So still they can actually use that knowledge, which is maybe right now in the systems of Europe, Western America or something ingrained already, but they still have access to that. So now we actually share that all over to also Mexico and Africa, and I'm hope that this will happen more and more over, that this knowledge is not just staying in the similar places.
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, John. Yeah, definitely a wide variety of stuff. Excited to hear about some of the developments in Mexico that you're looking into. It's going to be interesting how different countries develop, and I think AI is going to just potentially shuffle some things up, and entire countries and nations can really come up overnight as far as improvement, or in other cases maybe to the detriment as well. But it'll just be interesting to just look at the shifts. But yeah, Marius, why don't you just looking at our time, share a little bit about your background, and maybe we could wrap it up and then try to get some stuff on the next episodes, and maybe share a little bit, since you're kind of thinking of it, maybe share like some potential topics that would want, but definitely share your background first. So
yeah. But with these two interesting stories we already heard, this is going to set the bar high. But yes, so I'm Marius Wilsch, originally come from Germany. You may hear it in the accent. And I am personally a software engineer. I started programming. 3 months later, ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and I was just like, okay, what the hell? Is this still something I should learn? Is this something which is going to change what I do every day? And back then, when I compare it to what ChatGPT 3.5 was compared to the models we have now, I'm like, okay, why was I even scared? It was like so incapable compared to what we have today. I really would actually like to go back and just try it out again and see. But it totally changed, not the programming itself, it changed the speed of learning I could do. And to me, that was very interesting in my university because I can instantly see 2 different personas when AI was integrated in our university. People who instantly accepted it, and their speed of learning just went through the roof. A 2-year or 3-year university study went down to like maybe 2 years, or like do the same amount of 2 years with little time, versus other people not accepting at all. So that was like my first impression and like experience with AI, to see like how some people who just generally accept it and some people who just deny it and say like, I'm just going to be the old way, and the difference between those two. And I keep seeing this even now. But fast forward to today, I finished my university in software engineering and started an AI agency similar to Jhonatan. We help companies implement AI into their business as well. I personally am a huge fan of system design. This is also where I vibe with Steve a lot, because he looks at a system and he just sees processes even more than I. He has like a little glasses on where I just see one day I want to be there as well. And we go from little automations from like, for example, somebody has invoices and brings in, categorize them and puts them into a CRM, from bigger operations of taking a 1.8 million cell Excel and finding a way how this ingrained knowledge in that Excel can be extracted and then put out in our more modern interface, while AI can help you create those formulas with natural language instead of having to do the operation yourself. Why I love AI, and I think this is what I want to share also as a common theme into future episodes, is that as a programmer, usually you have this yes or no kind of operation. I think this is very understandable to everybody. However, now with AI, you actually have behavior. So it's kind of like you put in text and you get some other text out. And this is something which is also very natural to all of us, because right now I'm putting in text here, and hopefully at some point when people are chatting about those podcasts, we're getting text out of what people are thinking of this podcast, for example. And now we have the ability to actually, instead of just saying like, if this, do this, we have the ability to put something into a computer and get something out again. So I'm, as a programmer, able to replicate human behavior through code and AI. For example, instead of having a person who listens on a sales call to transcribe the sales call's meeting, we have an AI who can replicate that behavior through following instructions. And this is just very interesting to me as a programmer and running this company. And what I'm looking to achieve through this podcast, which we touched on at the beginning, is to have different professions on this episodes and see like what was their ChatGPT 3.5 moment? How did they accept it? Did they deny it? Did they learn over time while others already did it? And how do they see their profession when something like post-AGI comes and we have a digital system which is on par with our intelligence? Even though one thing I just want to throw into the room right now, but we can definitely catch on that later on, is usually and personally, I see AI actually as a little bit of a brain in a jar, where it has this intelligence. But for example, me as a programmer, if I would go to my job, let's assume I have a full-time job, and I just put my brain on the desk, my boss is not going to be too happy. He only needs my arms and my fingers to actually put all those little thoughts into a program. And this is where I see Jhonatan and me as a company, and Steve as well, come in to help give that brain actually the arms and the legs to interact with the human world. And this is still lacking hugely, especially for companies, because just a very intelligent person is worth nothing unless you give it the ability to interact with systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And the speed of learning thing is a topic that is pretty interesting to me because that's one of the experiments that I've done over the past year and a half or 2 years where I've built up an entire factory. This is a lot of dilapidated equipment that had to be rebuilt that I never worked on, but using AI to surface that information and train myself, which would normally, just somebody that's worked in industry and been around hundreds and hundreds, thousands of manufacturing processes over the years. Looking at it, it's just like that would take forever to train somebody. It's those things aren't necessarily possible, but now you can go pick that stuff off, get those skills, and actually build something with it within a year, which I was kind of blown away with myself. It's like areas that I thought, hey, I don't have necessarily the skills to do this. And then you acquire those skills, you could practice them, pull in the things that you'd forget, you have quick access to it. Now it's been ingrained from actually physically doing it. And now it's like you've taken, 4 or 5 years of learn, like what would take 4 or 5 years of skills to acquire, you've acquired it in a matter of months, and you're semi-proficient at it. And now you actually, from your thing you mentioned about systems, that's where it really comes in, because like now you can actually see how this whole thing fits in an entire equation. It's really taken that whole automation thing from Rockwell and taking it to that next echelon. It's just going further and further, and that's a really exciting field.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just about AI. It's like what we were just talking about with the second brain as well, like how different technologies can be integrated into like helping us learn. So yeah, it's going to be exciting to discover all these new ways.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. I think like maybe next episode, and it's still yet to be determined. I think we'll decide on it a little bit offline, but maybe the second brain aspect could be something that we could maybe discuss next week or on one of the episodes, and maybe even speed of learning. And there's also all the amazing guests that both John and Marius have kind of in mind to bring onto the show.
Yeah. And I guess I'd like to touch as well, and some ethics and governance of AI, which I also consider important, and especially because I mean you're both in like automations, so obviously it's like we push hard into that, but it's also important to to kind of like, or I would like to listen to your perspective on that, and like human requirements, and obviously like UBI and all this stuff, that it's also super important, and I think we should touch base on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's so much stuff to cover, and definitely excited to build this show out with you guys. And I'm sure the listeners and viewers will have awesome content to go home with and share and have conversations with other folks that they're looking to do. So super excited about it. But yeah, kind of what we're looking to do with this show, we'll have this on YouTube. You could also, we're looking to have a website where you can actually find some manuals, all of us together. We have an AI agency that we kind of collaborate on. It could help you build some AI products for you yourself, and then also specialize different things that each one of us do. You can reach out via the website, Discord, and there'll be other channels as we progress. And we're looking to have this show on a weekly basis. Initially, we're looking at either Monday or Tuesday nights, and there'll be more information in the links below. So be sure to be checking on that. And inside the description, there'll be more details around the show where you can catch it. So thank you for having us on.
Yes, thank you so much as well. I was really wanted to touch point on, and one thing I'm also really looking forward beyond all the topics you mentioned is eventually this will happen over time, is to also bring in a little bit of community building in here, where we say like, hey, he has this idea or this idea. We're not going to be here just throwing information at you. If you want to be a guest speaker, you have an idea what should be built out, you want to share on this together, we are more than happy to use this as a platform for also bringing in your ideas and extravating it out to a wider audience, because I really like the idea of getting in as much different point of views here, and possibly using AI to scale them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like also like part of the community, I think some of the things that we discussed is maybe some of the templates and some of the IP that we developed. We may share some of that where you could like log on and get like a newsletter, get a PDF to some of those things and some templates, or models that we built. We may share some of those on there. So yeah, definitely tap into the community once we get that built.
100%.
And also, you could hire us to build some of these things for you to help you jumpstart your company. So,
Yeah.
And especially, we only have so much bandwidth, but there might be some interesting projects that we'd be really excited to work on with you guys. So, I think there's going to be means to schedule 30-minute consult calls with us, and you could use the link to kind of do that. And if it fits, we can chat with you and see if this is something that we could kind of work on together and help you guys jumpstart your business.
All right. Thank you so much for listening in.